Hello, MLSecOps community, and welcome back to the MLSecOps Podcast. I'm one of your community leaders, Charlie McCarthy. It's wonderful to be back in the studio with you, and today I'm joined by my co-host and colleague, Sailesh Mishra, who's a colleague of mine at Protect AI, and our guest that we'll be interviewing today, Donato Capitella. Welcome, both of you, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you both here. Quickly, just to get the audience oriented, Sailesh, why don't we start with you, if you don't mind giving just a brief background for yourself, and then Donato will move on to you and then dig into the meat of the interview here.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Sailesh. I've been working with Protect AI as Director of Business Development for Gen AI security initiatives. Prior to this, I was working in a startup called Sidelabs, which was building an AI red teaming tool. We got acquired into the Protect AI's ecosystem, and that's how me and Charlie met each other, and this is a part of a team now.
So my name is Donato Capitella, and I am a principal security consultant with Secure Consulting. We are a cybersecurity company. We do penetration testing and adversary simulations, testing networks, applications, and systems that our clients build, and we are research-led. Our consultants spend 20 to 30% of their time researching different upcoming topics that they find interesting. And I happen to be the person that found Gen AI and LLMs interesting. So I have applied some of my knowledge as an ethical hacker and penetration tester to the world of AI.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again for being here. Let's dig into that a little bit more, Donato. You know, of course, you're a principal security consultant with Secure Consulting, but you've got such a broad career history. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about your journey from, software engineering and pen testing to becoming or teaching yourself about AI security and becoming more of an expert in this space? And, that led to launching a YouTube channel. Just what has that journey been like for you?
So I did start as a software engineer. I really like making things. But then the problem that I had as a software engineer was that it kind of pigeonholes you into like one language, one technology, especially if you go back 15 years ago, like I was a Java developer. And I was very curious about everything to do with computers. So the way that I got into cybersecurity was because it's one of the few areas where you can work with different clients week by week on different types of systems. So I can work on a network assessment of a Cisco router one week. The next week, I can work on a web application written in Ruby. Week after, I can do an adversary simulation. Basically, whatever my clients are building, you get to play with that particular technology. And obviously, you have to learn how it works in order to figure out how an attacker might be breaking it, because then what I do is breaking it. And now, as part of that, it was 2023, the beginning of 2023. A friend sent me ChatGPT. I log in, and this looked very different from anything else I had done when I studied machine learning. I did study like one machine learning course in university, maybe 16 years ago. And it was like, expert systems and all sorts of things that didn't look like any of that. So I wanted to teach myself how that worked. And I started, looking through books, coding labs, and I wanted to build a little LLM from scratch, but understanding everything that was going on. And then, as I very typically do, I needed an external motivation to do that and to do that well. And when I learn stuff, I also like to make these are not mind maps. These are canvases where I try to put all the concepts together. And so I started doing that. A friend said, "Oh, why don't you put it on YouTube?" And so I made the first video with one of these canvases talking about what I was learning. And then LLM Chronicles was born. And basically I documented that journey of how you go from zero to building a small LLM. And then on top of that, because I became the LLM guy in my company, when clients towards the end of 2023 actually started implementing all of these, because in my own time I had an interest and I understood a little bit about what LLMs were, I was very lucky, because then I got into all these meetings with all of these engineers from different organizations and data scientists, and they were talking to me about what they were building, and I was applying my hacker's mindset, thinking, how could somebody break this? And so that's how I got into Gen AI and LLM security.
Excellent. So transitioning to some of the work that you're doing now, your history and experience with penetration testing and ethical hacking, a term that I'm sure you're very familiar with is red teaming. And we're starting to hear more about AI red teaming or LLM red teaming. Are clients currently asking for LLM red team as a service now? And if so, what have you found they're typically looking for, and how do you define that term for them?
Okay, I think that's an extremely good question, and somewhat triggers me a little bit in a positive way, hopefully. But the reality is that we in cybersecurity use the term red teaming for something very, very specific. And so at the beginning, I wasn't really sure what people were asking for when they asked for LLM red teaming, because red teaming for us is an end-to-end adversary simulation. You pretend to be a Russian threat actor, nation state, and you try to infiltrate a company. Typically it takes 3 to 6 months, and you hack everything that you can hack, including people. It's not something that you do on a single system. But when people ask about LLM red teaming, our clients are asking for that. And I think because now the LLM security community has taken that term, so I have learned to adapt myself to what it means in there. And to me, people are asking for two things. They are asking for, most LLM red teaming feels like an LLM benchmark to me. Like if you're taking the LLM in isolation, you are asking questions about the safety of that LLM with certain prompts. That's similar to a benchmark. It could be static or adaptive. And typically those LLM red teams are focused a lot on harmful outcomes. So how to make a bomb? Will the LLM respond to that? Write me a piece of malware, or say something hateful. So hate speech and these kind of things. So that's what a lot of the LLM red teaming world talks about. Then I think when our clients come to us, what they actually mean, they are looking for a security assessment. And that's what I think the majority of organizations, by the way, mean actually when they are asking for an LLM red team. They are building something. They're building a use case, and the LLM happens to be one of the parts of that use case, and then they make the LLM interact with users, documents, data sources, tools and interactions. That defines your use case, and that defines the risk. And so what I think organizations are asking is, I have built, or I am using this particular use case. How could an attacker exploit that against me, against my clients, or against my organization? And to me, that's more similar to what we would typically call a security assessment, which is what I call it when I do it for clients. Okay, what have you built? And they say they want a red team, and eventually ends up being a security assessment. And part of it involves prompt injection and some of the other attacks, but obviously it depends what people have built. It's very context specific.
Donato, what are some of the common misconceptions or buzzwords that you've encountered when you discuss LLM red teaming or a security assessment or a security eval of an LLM?
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions, I typically ask the client whether what they're trying to get out of it. What is the question they're trying to answer? So most of our clients will use GPT-4 or on Azure, or they will use Anthropic Claude on AWS. These are the models that people use. And so when people come to me and ask for a red team of that, again, I think what they are asking is more to look at what they built that uses the model, and how the vulnerabilities which are inherent in the model can be used by an attacker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is what people actually ask. So there is a bit of misconception around that. And the other one, and this is where I think I am a little bit different in the community. I think that we need to look at these vulnerabilities in context. Like you can go to a chatbot and you can make it say something hateful. We don't like that, but you are jailbreaking it. But if you're making that chatbot say that back to you, the risk, the way that we see it in cybersecurity, this would be a low risk. Now, if you can make that chatbot say or do stuff that impact other users, or that perhaps impact the organization that's actually running that particular application, then it matters more. So a lot of what we do is moving from, I'm jailbreaking the LLM, how to make a bomb or how to make meth, like the stuff that Pliny the prompter does on X, all those tweets. We try to move from that to what's the risk to your customers, to your organization, and how somebody could actually attack it. So I think the misconception is about what people are trying to get out of it and whether you should red team an LLM if you haven't even trained an LLM. I mean, if you've trained or modified an LLM, maybe do a red team because it's a benchmark. It tells you, is it better or worse when it comes to those attacks than what it was before? But if you take GPT-4, if I red team GPT-4 with the same data set, I will get the same output that I get for all my clients. The model is the same.
But will that be so in a probabilistic setup like what we've seen in generative AI? Will it be a silver bullet of sort of just training the model with a certain data set, running a red teaming exercise, getting the same kind of outcomes and insights for every client? How would you differentiate between, let's say, red teaming a foundation model like a GPT-4 versus what the clients have done and what could be the security impact of their actions?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that that's immediate. The first thing that I ask clients is, what have you done? And you get into that call and they're like, oh, we trained this model on our data. And then I look into it and I'm like, okay, that's just RAG. You haven't touched the original model the slightest. The majority of people don't fine tune models. Now, if you fine tune a model on a data set, then I think you can ask the question, okay, I have any benchmark and I can benchmark the model to see whether your fine tuning has created some problems. Maybe it's more vulnerable to certain types of attacks or less vulnerable. Maybe you've got some data in your training set that I can leak. That's okay. But the majority of people don't do that. The majority of people are doing RAG or are doing agentic workflows. They basically consume APIs of standard models, and then around those APIs, they build their use cases. I mean, if you think about it, Copilot is this, GitHub Copilot, if you reverse engineer it, it's literally directly prompting GPT-4 and GPT-4o mini. It's not a custom model that they changed. So this is the reality that I see very often.
Yes, that's absolutely true. What kind of risks or vulnerabilities have you typically uncovered when you, let's say, do a red teaming engagement for a client? I mean, the scope that we are discussing is very broad. So,
So first of all, it could be anything, right? So most people have got these chatbots, which is the use case that people think immediately, but it doesn't have to be a chatbot. You could have different types of, I call them Gen AI features. Maybe you have a button. Actually, like 2 weeks ago, I was testing something that a client did where there is like a button that they can press and it summarizes like a case, like a complaint with all of the information that the customer put in. That's not a chat. That's not conversational workflow. And then you also have agentic workflows. So where the workflow is not static, but obviously the LLM is given tools and it can perform actions, calling those tools dynamically. So these are the three different things that we typically test. And I'll give you some examples. So last week we did a test of a chatbot for a financial organization, and they had a few. So the question was, can it access any data? Or is it just generic? So that's a very important question to define risk. But then what's important is that if we tested that in isolation, let's say we took any benchmark, I say Garak because it's very well known, and we ran an LLM benchmark like Garak against an API for a conversational agent, we would have gotten a lot of information out of it. Not really sure how to interpret it. But if you tested that generative conversation in isolation, you wouldn't have found out that there was an access control issue, which is a typical cybersecurity vulnerability, where now I can jailbreak the LLM. So that's the LLM side of it. But it's not just to make it answer something back to me, but we could essentially inject a prompt into another user's chat. So now, what is a standard jailbreak? Tell me how to make a bomb. I could make the chatbot by using, again, not an LLM vulnerability, but a classic web application vulnerability. I could make the chatbot say something back to another user. So now I could attack other users leveraging the LLM and the jailbreak. So that jailbreak that would have been a low risk for us now becomes a high risk. And we demonstrated how you can make it, obviously, pose as the company and tell the user to input some confidential data and then exfiltrate that information. This is some, data exfiltration is a big thing with markdown images and stuff like that in LLM. So that's an example. Another example on the other side, I mean, this is a conversational case.
Yes.
The other example is agents. Like we looked at something we did last year is looking at browser agents. And last year, they were just research projects. So there was this thing called Taxi AI. It's a plugin. You put it in the browser and it connects your current tab to any LLM you want. And it gives the LLM two actions. You can click on the page wherever you want, and it can type whatever it wants in any field. So it iteratively calls it, you give it a prompt, and it navigates the page. And we showed that, you could send an email, do a prompt injection attack, and then make, for example, the LLM, poison the LLM in that case, and make it now perform under the control of the attacker. And we have a little demo where we steal some information from a user's mailbox. But these are more of the agentic workflows that back then, when we looked at this in April 2024, people laughed at us because they said, oh yeah, but nobody will ever do this. If you look at what people are doing now, that's quite a lot of it. So, but hopefully I've given you an idea of the kind of like different use cases. And again, you've got the agentic side, tools and actions, and these are typically where we find the biggest vulnerabilities, because you can use those jailbreaking, prompt injection, the stuff that you do in red teaming of LLMs, but now you can use it to make the LLM do an attack against a user or against an organization. And on the other side, the conversational agents, I think a lot of it has to do with whether you can make it say something to a different user, either via documents or indirect prompt injection, or via some classic broken access control vulnerability in web applications. So this is kind of the spread of the things that we see and do.
The spectrum of it. Yeah. I believe the risk management frameworks that are available today, the OWASPs of the world, the NIST, the communities are also doing such a great job in sort of building the guidelines around this. Everyone's struggling and also super excited to see how the agentic side of security comes in. So great insights. Thank you, Donato.
Yeah, and to your point, Sailesh, this is definitely feels like an all hands on deck moment in time. We need as many perspectives as possible. So it's such a treat to have you here sharing this with us, Donato. Can you talk a bit about, you just shared a wealth of information, and I can see how somebody like a business leader or, maybe somebody on the engineering side who might not have a deep background in security, there might be a sense of overwhelm around all of this and like where our systems are at risk, or, what the specific risks are in just our organization, because they can vary. Can you provide a bit of insight into individuals or teams, organizations who might wish to engage in like LLM red team activities with a very experienced security consultant like yourself or your firm? Are there questions that they should have ready that they're hoping to have answered, or information about their use case that they should bring with them to those initial meetings, like goals from the outset for these types of assessments that will make an LLM red team engagement the most valuable? Can you share anything there?
So the most important thing is to talk about the use case and understand that the biggest vulnerability is not in the LLM itself, also because you can't fix the vulnerability in the LLM to an extent, but it is in the interactions with the external world that the use case provides. So they should come to a meeting talking about this, a scoping meeting for an LLM red team, telling me or anybody that's doing that what users are using the application, what document and data sources come in and in what way, whether there are agentic workflows and tools and APIs, and what do these look like, and what's the level of agency that the LLM has. Because all of these things, users, level of agency, system, APIs, tools, and documents, knowledge bases, categorization of what kind of data it's got access to, that builds you a threat model and frames how I'm going to test that and what kind of things matter to you. So instead of going to somebody and saying, oh, we're using GPT-4, can you red team it? Tell me, oh, we have a workflow when customer emails come in with complaints, we pass them through an LLM, and the output goes into this web application and it's drawn in this particular way, and then it's got access to this tool to do this and that. Okay, that's going to help me, and it's going to help the client understand this is what matters, and these are the controls. This is what we can test, and these are the controls we can put in place to deploy these in production in a safe way. Because all of these, ultimately, people need to keep in mind that we need to deploy these in production now. Like, there is a lot of research in academia, but the difference between what we do with our clients and what happens in academia is that they have to put these live in front of people now. So how do you do that? And that depends on the use case.
I see. Okay, thank you. And on the other side of the coin, when you're engaging with clients on this topic, are there stakeholders on the client side that are most useful for you to be speaking with during these scoping meetings? Like, who are the personas that are helpful to have in the room during those initial conversations?
Data scientists and software engineers.
Okay, those two specifically.
Those
Any
specifically.
particular, for audience members who maybe these are some new concepts, can you share a little bit about the why behind that quickly?
It's because we really need to understand what it is that people are building. And again, typically, if you don't know what's being built, there will be confusion. People will come in and say, oh, we have trained a model on our data. Well, if you have done that, I do a completely different test. Instead of training, you're just using a retrieval augmented pipeline and you're using GPT-4, then I do the test in a different way and the risk is different. So it's important for us to get access as early as possible to the people that have actually designed and implemented the system, because they are going to be able to tell us with the right terminology what it is that we're actually going to test. So some people tell us we have an agent that needs to be tested, and it is just a retrieval augmented generation pipeline with public documents. There is literally no agency, no tools, no API, nothing dynamic. So for us, having those people in the room that know what's being built and that can use the right terminology really helps understand what type of test we're going to do.
That makes perfect sense. Before I kind of switch gears to talk about some tooling, Sailesh, did you have additional questions or double clicking to do on like the LLM red teaming topic before we move on? Anything else you wanted to ask?
Sure. I also wanted to understand, Donato, what's your perspective on the speed of a red teaming engagement? The speed at which the generative AI world is evolving. I mean, the attacks that are probably working today may not be working tomorrow. And if a corrective action is delayed by, let's say, a few weeks, then maybe you become far more vulnerable than you were like a couple of weeks back. So what's your perspective there?
So I think I take it a little bit differently. So right now, when you think of LLM attacks, jailbreaks, and prompt injection. There is no LLM that you can't jailbreak, and there is no guardrail that can't be bypassed given enough computational time. And so there is obviously research papers on adaptive attacks. I mean, at the beginning, people did this manually, and we still do it manually. A lot of the manual stuff and the simple stuff still works, but the reality of it is that if you give me enough computation power and I can make enough requests and in the right conditions with adaptive attacks, I can jailbreak any model. The models that we have now. For example, Anthropic just last month had the best of N attack, which honestly is a very simple black box attack. We implemented it immediately, and there hasn't been anything that we haven't been able to
Break with it.
to jailbreak. So for me, practically with my cyber security background, there are other things in cybersecurity that you can't fully fix. The Windows operating system, it's going to have 0-day vulnerabilities. It's going to have vulnerabilities people are going to find, and you can never find all of them. So how do we deal with that? We have a lot of mitigating controls and defense in depth. And that's a saying that I recommend people do with LLM applications. You have kind of like a LLM application pipeline. So yes, you have the LLM, but then you have the user input. You have a set of guardrails that you can have at the input. You have a set of guardrails that you should have at the output. And so all of that pipeline needs to come into play to ensure that you are mitigating the risk of those vulnerabilities. We even released an application security canvas for a security canvas for LLM applications, where we kind of go through all of these controls. Like, you've got prompt injection models, different types of contextual input validation. Output validation is very important. I mean, I say just one thing. It surprises me how many people take the output of the LLM and just check it back to the user without checking if it contains any link or markdown image or unexpected content. I mean, this is not even machine learning, right? I can look at the output of an LLM using a regular expression and see if there is a link to a domain that I have not allowed, that my application in use case should never produce. So these are small things, and there is obviously harmful content that you can check with different models. So you do all of these. But all of these controls can fail to an extent. So then the final thing that I tell people is practically, and what we do with our clients, it's not just about the controls that you're putting in place, but it's about detecting when somebody is triggering that particular for example, jailbreak check. You have a model, input comes in, the model classifies that as potential jailbreak attack. You stop it. I'm going to go again. Best of an attack. I tried different attacks, modified input. Eventually, I am going to bypass your guardrail. Problem is, how much is it going to take me? So if you set a threshold and you say, I've got all of these checks. If a user triggers 10 of them in half an hour, I'm going to lock the account. I'm not going to allow them to keep probing at the application. Now, that's what in practice for a lot of our clients is making it possible for them to deploy these applications in production. They have guardrails. It's not that they deploy without guardrails, but they know that they will fail, exactly as you said, like it moves very fast. But it's similar to password guessing attacks. So your password is secure, but we have password lockout. If I try to log in into your account with 5 passwords that are not your password, your account is going to be locked. That's to prevent me from going over all the possible passwords. And I think you do the same with jailbreaks. You detect them as best as you can, but you stop people that keep trying to do that, because eventually they will find a way through.
Yeah, so continuous observability and monitoring on the entire system is what, sort of is the order of the day very soon.
Switching gears a little bit. So when we're talking about security for AI or AI powered technologies, or, cybersecurity for AI, we like to touch on the people, processes, and tools, like the 3 main categories. And we've talked a little bit about people and processes. You shared during our prep for this episode, Donato, that y'all were just about to release a new open source tool called Spiky. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And I think since then it has been released. Will you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it has been released actually today. And that's so we spent the last year doing these LLM application security assessments for our clients. And as we were doing them, again, in the beginning, we were doing a lot of manual attacks, and then we started automating some attacks. It was a bunch of scripts that we had. And then at some point, we decided to pull some of these scripts together into a framework that was made for penetration testers, for security people. So if you look at something like Garak, we tried to use it, but it's an LLM benchmark. It doesn't really serve you very well for a lot of reasons. If you're doing an assessment of something, an application use case for a client, we needed something where we could, first of all, focus not on the harmful outcomes like how to make a bomb, but on attacks relevant for us, like data exfiltration, HTML injection, resource exhaustion, and access control. So making the LLM call a tool that it shouldn't call. So we needed something that allowed us to do this use case specific. So something where I look at the client use case, I look at documents that they're using, and I can generate a dynamic data set with different types of jailbreaks and objectives. And then I can, and this could be small or large, depending on how much I have. And then I can send it to the application, maybe using tooling that we use. Like I'll mention some tools like Burp Suite, which is an HTTP interception proxy. So this is common tooling that penetration testers would use. And then you could look at the answers and determine whether the attack was successful without having to use an LLM verifier or an LLM judge. So we kind of had to boil it down to things that would be practical to do, and that it would be very easy to create your own data sets. And that's what Spiky essentially does. It allows you to input your own jailbreak. So it comes with a library of jailbreaks, a library of different things that you want to do, data exfiltration, and then it comes with very easy ways to detect whether those have been successful. And then it allows you to generate data set with some modifiers and test them against an application. So that's been what we've released now. It's available on spiky.ai, spiky with a terrible spelling because we couldn't just make it, we couldn't find an acronym that said what we wanted to say, but spiky stands for, what does it stand for? I forgot. Simple prompt injection kit for evaluation and exploitation. So it's spiky, but with two E's at the end rather than a Y. Silly name, but we had to find something that worked. But essentially, this is free, open source. People can download it. We have other things that we're going to release. For example, the best of an adaptive attack. We opted not to release it yet because it's an attack that's got essentially 100% success rate, and a lot of the other things that we tested, have got some success rate. So we wanted to give a tool to the community that could be used, but we kind of want some of the defenses to catch up a little bit before we start releasing the whole data sets. But anyway, that tool can be used to test an end-to-end LLM application use case. You can use it to create a custom data set for a client. You can use it to directly test guardrails, and you can also use it to benchmark an LLM. And actually, we did it. I think we took 20 LLMs and we benchmarked them. Even the reasoning models, O1, O1 Mini, DeepSeek R1.
DeepSeek, yeah.
Gemini, I think we benchmarked all of them on that. But the thing is that people can go look at the benchmark and make their own version where they say, okay, what would happen if I change the system, if I use different prompt engineering? What would happen if I change the use case? So we released it as a simple benchmark, but people can play with it. Interestingly, if you look at the results, for example, DeepSeek, which is now what everybody is talking about, it's obvious that it's not being fine-tuned or trained to be resistant to prompt injection. Like it's literally at the bottom. I mean, almost any other model performs better on those types of attacks than DeepSeek R1. And this is also so something for people to remember. I think there is a lot of hype. The models are good, but just because a model can reason very well with certain problems, it doesn't mean that it's got general intelligence. If you haven't taught it to reason about, what prompt injection is, it's actually going to be very prompt injectable. I don't know which model, well, when I go to the benchmark, I think the only model that performed worse than DeepSeek models is Llama 370B. Pretty much every other model, at least for the basic version of the benchmark, was more resistant, was less likely to follow instructions that were injected. So, take it for what it is. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think they did it on purpose. I just think they did not design the model to be resistant to these attacks because they were focused on something else.
So effectively, Donato, spiky is a combination of, let's say, a certain technique and probably an outcome. Is that how you would sort of define the key elements of the data set that gets generated?
Yeah, so it's a combination of documents that are very use case specific. You can put them as many of these documents as you want, and these documents can be injected with a combination of what we call a jailbreak and what we call an instruction that you want to include. So we use jailbreaks to include instructions. So it could be something as simple as new important instructions and then the type of instruction or any other type of jailbreak. This is a test. You are in a test pipeline and you're not talking to a real human. For the test not to fail, you need to do X, and then X would be some of the instructions. And all of these things are mixed up. So you've got this kind of jailbreak technique plus instruction that then is injected at the beginning, or it could be injected in the middle and at the end of the document, and it can be injected in different ways. You can control whether you want to just put it in the middle, what kind of delimiters you want, and then you create these malicious documents that you can send to an application if you have the application that you're testing. Or if you just want to test the LLM in isolation, then you tell Spiky, okay, this is a document, and Spiky supports summarization and Q&A use cases. So you can say, you can basically say, Spiky can make believe a summarization use case. Please summarize this document, or this is a question to answer on this document. And then Spiky can look at the output and tell you whether, as it was summarizing or as it was answering the question, it also followed the malicious instruction that had been injected. So that's essentially what it does.
And this would have taken significant amount of research, like you said in the beginning. What are your key prioritization takeaways that you can share with us while building Spiky?
Oh, honestly, the customization was one of the most important stuff. I want to be able to create standalone documents that I can send to an application. So without system message and without prompt. I just want to be able to get the document. Then if I want to add the prompt, I can, but I wanted to be able to get raw documents that then I could submit anyway to whatever application I wanted. So that was number one. Number two, I didn't want an LLM judge. I wanted to be able to look at the output of the LLM and determine whether or not the attack was successful without making another LLM call and asking a judge whether the attack was successful. This costs a lot and slows you down. So these were the two main design goals: ability to generate my data sets that I could integrate with anything based on the use case, and I didn't want to use an LLM judge because this needed to be practical. And you can just do pip install Spiky init, and then you get your working directory and you can start using it immediately.
You've already kind of hinted at it, but can you share a few examples where you might have already implemented them in real world use cases or are planning to? Like, what can be some real world examples where Spiky can be used?
So we have one that we put on a tutorial on our website. So obviously all of these things are adapted from testing that we've done. We basically use versions of Spiky in all the testing we've been doing in the past 4 or 5 months when we collected those scripts together. But for example, a use case was an agent, no, an agent was like a Gen AI feature that would summarize some just try not to give away too much, but we're summarizing some trading rules that can be written in a language. And so a user that doesn't know that language could look at some of these trading rules in this trading platform, press a button, and that would explain to the user what that trading rules was doing in that platform. And so obviously it's a summarization use case there. And what we did, we took some realistic trading rules and then we as documents, and then we used Spiky to create different types of injections where it would produce markdown images or JavaScript to see whether you could make, as part of the summary, you could make it produce JavaScript that then would be executed in the browser, because it doesn't exist in isolation. It was rendered in an application. So we created that data set and we sent it. They had some prompt injection guardrail. So having that kind of data set that eventually ended up having 500 samples, we kind of could see, okay, these have been blocked and these are the techniques that were able to bypass them. It also has plugins to do like alterations, like, lead speech and stuff like that. So that was a case that we used it, and we kind of have something similar that we described on our blog if people want to try and play with it.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. And kudos also to you and your team for developing this tool and providing something to the open source community to be able to explore some of this on their own. Before we start to wrap up the show, I wanted to ask your perspectives, Donato, on a term that has been being passed around the industry. We're hearing it all over the place, agentic AI, or some people just shorten it to agents. Can you wax poetic about that and just some insights and what you've been seeing in the space?
For me, on the agent side, what's really important to understand is that there are whenever an LLM is given tools that it can use and it can call, there are some use cases where it's fairly easy to secure. Because you can apply access control on whatever the LLM is allowed to do externally, outside of the LLM. And so all those cases are pretty easy. Whenever you have agents like a browser agent, where it's really difficult to apply access control, because the agent can click on anything and you don't have and you don't have a way to really know on a generic web page what's the access there, what's the action that you should be doing, because the thing is just clicking. That's harder. And even harder are coding agents. Now, I looked, and we published it. We looked at OpenDevin, which is now called OpenAnds, and you can do prompt injection. The issue, and we showed how you can open a GitHub issue, so something public. You have a repository, you open an issue, and you put a prompt injection attack in there. Now, when these open hands or any kind of coding agent, if you point it to look at the open issues in the GitHub repository, the prompt injection is going to work on the agent, and then you can tell it to do other things. The problem is that the agent can do a lot, because it's got access to a workspace, it's got access to the code base, it's got access to Bash, it's got access to a Python interpreter, it's got access to the internet. So these agentic workflows, some of them, the ones that you can put a lot of predefined rails and access control with precise tools and APIs, they are easier to secure. The ones that are very generic, like a browser agent that can browse anywhere, or even worse, an autonomous software developer that can browse the internet, open GitHub issues, and talk to people, and got access to all the stuff that it's got access to. It's fairly hard to secure that. I haven't seen anybody that's really done that in a way that I would say is secure in a satisfactory way.
Awesome. So we've got a few minutes left here, folks. I'd like to pivot one more time and talk just a little bit about your passion project, Donato, LLM Chronicles. Content creation, I've noticed, especially as a leader in the AI security space related to awareness. The MLSecOps community has been a hub for a couple years, kind of teaching folks about building security practices into the AI ML pipeline. Are there any discoveries you've made throughout the process of creating content for your YouTube channel to promote AI security awareness or LLM security awareness, that just trends that you've noticed maybe, or things that people are really picking up on or interested in, or what's that journey been like for you from a content creator perspective?
So first off, the inspiration. Like I wouldn't be here if MLSecOps hadn't been there. Like it was obviously at the beginning, I didn't know anything. If you go back to 2 years ago, yeah, I didn't know anything. So just having resources like MLSecOps, especially podcasts where like this one, where you get to meet the people that are actually doing the tech, I think is really important because it gets you this human aspect and people talking and discussing the tech and their experience. So I think this is one of the most important things that creates a community. And every time I approach a new topic, I always try to understand the technical side. You can buy a book, you can do a course, but then you have to get to know the people, their opinions, the discourse. And I think these kind of things are incredibly helpful. It was this podcast, and I think I also, and I'll just mention him because it was so important to me. Sebastian Brashka has a lot of books on how LLMs work. If he hadn't written those books, I don't know if I would have gotten where I got now. So I love people that are sharing. And for me, the journey, I mean, it's hard. I mean, you do this, so you know how hard it is to do something that's not infotainment. And there is nothing wrong with infotainment, but what we're doing now is not infotainment. This is discussions, opinions, content, learning. So it requires that people are in the right mindset to want to listen to you. Like you're not going to relax on the sofa and at 10 p.m. and probably listen to an episode of this. Definitely not listen to me. I mean, I could help you sleep, put you to sleep probably, but but what's challenging with what we do, because it's not infotainment, people need to be in the right mindset, and there is a lot of information. So even with my channel, I have a few people that follow, and the challenge is always, how do you make the content so that it sticks and it's your voice and it's people are getting something out of it. So one thing that I don't do, that I think a lot of people do, is as soon as there is a new model, I will not make a video shouting into the microphone, this changes everything, the world of AI is never going to be as it was, this is the end of it, China is going to take over, Nvidia doesn't exist anymore, and then, it's okay, like it's fun, but there is no information.
So what I'm hearing is seek resources that have the primary intention of being educational. Yeah, a lot of intention behind it, I think, is the main thing.
So, Donato, we discussed so many insightful things today. And is there something that you feel we did not cover? Like I have a question in my mind, and I'm not sure if we have sort of discussed this. But when should a client who's building generative AI applications, when should they start thinking about a red teaming assessment?
Before
This is a
they
question
build
that I
it,
have.
before they build it.
Right. Yes, that's very true. But yeah, I just wanted to lay that question out for you. But is there anything else that you think we should have covered and we kind of maybe skipped over, and you would like to sort of re-emphasize any key takeaways?
So key takeaways for me, I think what's really important is think about the security of your Gen AI use cases rather than of the security of the individual LLMs. Vulnerabilities do exist in a context. think about that context and how an attacker is going to hack it, and start thinking about the remedial actions. That LLM application security canvas with all of those remedial actions, all of those mitigating controls, so the input, the output, the access control, and the detection. So detect when somebody is trying to jailbreak or prompt inject, allow 5, 10 attempts, and then block them. This is appropriate for the majority of use case. Unless you are OpenAI and you're providing a general purpose LLM, if you are an organization and you are a bank and there is an LLM that I can talk to, I shouldn't be able to send 10,000 requests containing all different jailbreaks. You need to stop that, and you need to think of that before you start even building the application. What kind of guardrails are you going to put in around that use case that makes sense for that specific use case?
Vulnerability exists in a context. That's kind of it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, well, in the interest of time, I hate to wrap it up. I feel like we could go on a lot longer, and maybe Donato sometime, if you're willing, you come back and we can do another episode and dig into some more. But for today, just want to express my sincere thanks to both of you for being on the show here, to our sponsors, Protect AI, who operate the MLSecOps community. And then final note, Donato, if folks would like to get in touch with you, we can link something to the show notes. What's the best way to do that? Is it LinkedIn? Is it a website? Is it an online form?
LinkedIn and YouTube. I mean, find a video on YouTube that you actually have a question on, ask the question there. That's going to help the YouTube algorithm. It likes that, but I also respond to all people's comments.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll absolutely link to the LLM Chronicles in the show notes for sure. Okay, well, thank you again both so much, and everyone who has tuned in for this episode, we appreciate you, and we will see you next time.